welcome. My name is Eric Einhorn. I'm the General and Artistic Director of On-Site Opera, and we're so thrilled to have you all here um, in the midst of our industry Q&A sessions with our wonderful Artistic Advisory Council members, and we're thrilled to be hosting this conversation with Justin and Blythe. I've gathered your questions for anybody who has put questions into the registration form when you signed up for this. We've pulled those from the forms and we put them on the list for today. But if, as has been happening, the conversation inspires other questions. So please don't be shy, and we'll get underway. So our amazing speakers with us today, Blythe Gaissert, who has sung with On-Site Opera on several occasions, was part of our first production of The Tale of the Silly Baby Mouse at the Bronx Zoo, and has reprised that role many times of Auntie Duck. Let's see, what else? You were Cleopatra several years ago in our double bill of monodramas, where the famous story is she had to act alongside a live snake, and also featured in Morning Star 2 years ago, I believe now. And am I missing anything? That's it, right? Other things we're going to hire you for. But in addition to On-Site and all those things, Blythe performs all over the place, a variety of rep, a significant amount of new music, having sung as one in many places, 27, and Looking at You at the Here Art Center recently, also performing at places like San Diego Opera, Opera Parallel, City Opera, Carnegie Hall, the Met, the LA Phil, LA Opera, Dallas Symphony, Prototype, Aldborough, Tulsa, Lyric Opera Kansas City, Sarasota, and Saratoga. An amazing mezzo, a great artist, and thrilled to have her here and as a part of our great Artistic Advisory Council. Justin Werner, the chair of our Advisory Council, is the founder of Stratagem Artists, a wonderful boutique artist management firm, home to many great singers. Before that, he was the co-founder and artist manager for Corrit and Werner Artist Management. And before that, cut his teeth at IMG. He's also the founder and artistic director of the New York Opera Exchange, which was an amazing organization that helped foster emerging singers, directors, and designers. And he's a frequent panelist for Opera America programs that help guide and inspire young singers. So Justin, thank you so much for being here. I want to start out by having both of you give us a little bit of a kind of a Reader's Digest version of your journey from student to here, twists and turns, degrees you got, mistakes you made, or just sort of the landing points of how you got to where you got to. Blythe, why don't we start with you?
Oh, okay. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. I have not had a traditional path by any means. I did musical theater growing up, and then I sang in a rock band. And when I was in college, I felt myself sort of disenchanted with the classical restrictions that I felt were being put on me, and went out and was exploring straight theater and other kinds of music, jazz and so forth, for a couple of years before I went back to classical music. I might add, I was also they thought I was a soprano originally, which was not the case. And so figuring out what repertoire I should actually be singing was kind of helpful in that regard. So I went to 3 different undergrads, and it took me 7.5 years to get my undergrad degree. And then I applied to 3 graduate schools, and I ended up at CCM, thank God, and had a really great experience there. I did 2 degrees there, both a master's and an artist's diploma. and I really didn't know diddly when I got there. But they had such a great program at the time, and really helped me to sort of be more okay with who I was, which, you know, was sort of not a typical classical singer. I didn't feel like I was like everyone else. We did a lot of contemporary repertoire in my university at the time, because the director of opera studies there was really into it. So that was fortunate for me because I really liked it. And I did some summer programs during that time period. I was a young artist in Cincinnati Opera, and I went to Aspen a couple times, and Saratoga Springs, and I did Marilla after graduate school. I moved here in 2004 after I finished school, and sort of had 3 jobs and roughed it for a couple of years until things got going. Um, I'm on my 3rd manager, which I'm sure we will talk about. And it's been a very sort of, you know, non-linear path for me of a lot of regional work, some higher level work, and a lot of stuff that I've just basically created on my own, or in cahoots with my husband, who is also a musician.
Excellent, thank you. Justin.
Hey, everybody. First of all, it's so lovely to see so many familiar faces, especially people who I went to school with, who I've sang with, who have been part of my artistic life at many different times. So some of you will know parts of this story. So I went to Boston University for my undergraduate as a singer. After I graduated, I made a Fox switch from baritone to tenor. And in the time in between when my teacher asked me what I wanted to do, I founded an opera company called the New York Opera Exchange that gave emerging singers the opportunity to do sort of the top 25 operas in full costume with full orchestra in original language, so they'd be able to bring those roles to their professional careers. While I was running that company, I went to grad school at Queens College for a year, originally for my master's, but then when I realized 3 lessons in, my colleagues were more talented than me and I was going to be a manager, they let me change to an artist diploma program instead, which I'm always very thankful for. So I interned at IMG for that whole year, learned a lot about, honestly, what I did not want to be as a manager, and what I wanted to be, and spent 2 years in between there applying for jobs, being too qualified for an assistant job, but too young to be a manager. So I decided to just start my own shop. So I've been running my own company for 5 years now, 2 under the auspices of Stratagem. My former business partner, the credit Werner, has left the business. And, you know, we have singers at every major house in the country. We have singers on this call who are with us. And, you know, I think I just try to provide the service that I would want as a singer and that I know my colleagues have told me they want.
Excellent. Well, no surprise, this is one of our most popular sessions, because this is the topic that it feels like is always discussed, but never really, it's always mentioned, but never discussed, I should say. That it's a crucial part of our business and it affects just about everybody. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here and for Justin and Blythe in advance for your candor in all of this. So the title is on behalf of my client, the actor-singer relationship. So let's start this off with a hefty question. Blythe, what should a singer expect from their agent?
You know, I think this is really, really hard. Justin and I had actually talked beforehand about this. And I think first, I should say what they shouldn't expect.
Okay.
You can't expect your manager to, quote unquote, get work for you. It doesn't work that way. It's a collaboration, and, you know, ultimately they work for you, and you have to have initiative. You have to have, you know, a good idea of who you are and what you have to sell. I think that they are there to basically give you a voice, with people that it's, you know, and I know we're going to get to the whole self-management thing, but as a general rule, singers don't want to have to deal with administrative people or with negotiations. So in my experience, when it's working well, they are there as a sounding board for repertoire ideas and for guidance in your career. They're there to help you negotiate your contracts and help you get your worth to the best of their ability and to protect you. And they are there, you know, to help as a bridge between you and those companies and organizations.
Okay. Now, Justin, do you line up with all those? What should a manager expect from their singers?
For sure, I definitely agree with almost everything that Blythe said, especially when singers come to management and expect for them to just take the reins of their career and run with it. I always say that it's actually double the work for the singer to bring in a manager, because you have to CC us on all your correspondence. You have to let us know when offers are made. And I mean, with so many offers being made, unfortunately, with Facebook Messenger and Instagram messages, and it just, the chain of command from company to singer has been really blurred. And it makes our job on the management side that much harder. You know, I think we should specify sort of the difference between a manager and an agent in opera and then otherwise. You know, in opera, I always joke that opera people can't afford both a manager and agent, so I have to do both. I think there are a lot more agents out there who are negotiators and can execute contracts and know legalese, but there are less managers who know repertoire, who know what it's like to be a singer, who can really empathize and sympathize with the plight that we've all chosen on this call, and also to really form a strategic plan for their career in terms of repertoire. You know, I see we have directors here. Stratagem is just dipping its toe into the director field, and that strategic plan for a director in terms of ADing versus directing, in terms of company level, is so much different than a singer, where I think a lot of that is sort of set in front of you in a very linear path in a lot of ways. I think from our singers, we should expect for them to be prepared. We should expect for them to, most of all, just be good human beings. I'm much prouder of the level of person I have on this roster than I am of their singing ability, and their singing ability is pretty high. And I would love to have a world where rosters know each other, where there's just a little bit more camaraderie, where there is, you know, I've talked to colleagues from other rosters and they jump on these Zoom calls and they don't know anybody. And that's no one's fault, but I just think it's important for us as managers to build that trust and to build that relationship, both with each individual singer, but also the organism as a whole.
Perfect, thank you. Now you mentioned the difference between an agent and a manager, which I think is in opera, it gets thrown around a lot. It's a semantic thing. People lump it all together as the typical artist manager in opera. Seems to skew more towards the latter part of your description, which is sort of the negotiator plus repertoire knowledge plus strategic plan. So can you speak more about that, the sort of the strategic plan element of it, and what role does the manager play in the marketing, cultivation, and overall empowering of the singer now and in the sort of that 5-year track?
Yeah, so I'm very proud to say that Stratagem has not missed a New York City main stage audition for any of our artists in 3 years. That availability, that presence in the room helps us gauge what areas are working, what's not, what an audition at 70% or 100% is, what the room is reacting with. So, you know, you can only get so much from a recording. You get different things from performance. We also travel to see performances as much as we can. But most people are casting shows from audition. So I think it's really important to hone that in as a skill. And of course, talk about where the voice is headed with their teacher, with their coach. I often say that Stratagem is just part of the toolbox. We're not replacing the toolbox. We talk all the time with singers' existing teachers and coaches to make sure that we're on the right track. Many times when a singer signs with us, they talk to their teacher and manager first, or teacher and coach first, to make sure our paths are on the same wavelength. And I think that's incredibly important, because I don't think we're ever signing an artist to reinvent the wheel. They've always have something to offer that is attractive, and then we help amplify that. I'm technically a millennial, I think, but I'm terrible with social media. I think it's really pushy, and I always feel very gross about it. And that's why I hired Zoe, my colleague who's on this call, who's incredible, who really embraces that marketing side of the business, who is more, functional in social media and website design than I am. And I think it's incredibly important for singers to push themselves not only as artists but as humans. Like, we are doing a series right now on our Instagram that's nothing about opera. It's all what our singers are doing in their lives in quarantine. That's not, oh, I'm learning a new aria, or, oh, I'm practicing. It's them with their pets. It's, we're learning K-pop dance over TikTok with one of our singers who choreographed it for us. Like, I think it's just really important that we're all people first and singers second. And social media is such an easy way to show that. It's an easy way to show that you're someone I'd want in the rehearsal room for a month, not someone I'd want to hear in a show for a day. So I think, as much as we can talk, I mean, being a baritone and a tenor, being in, hundreds of auditions a year, I hear a lot of rap, especially new American rap, that's sort of coming up the ranks. I think it's important to have a pulse on that, but I think more importantly, it's how each singer reflects in a snippet, whether it be a recording, whether it be an in-person interaction, or whether it be, their website.
Great, thank you. Blythe, you mentioned earlier that you have been through 3 managers. So we'll talk more in a second about shifting managers, but out of those 3 experiences, what are those positive through lines that you look for in a manager, and what are the things that have given you pause to make you want to look elsewhere?
I think the most important thing or important thing to look for in a manager is somebody who really gets you, who you are as an artist and a person, and is really excited about that. Because if they don't really believe in your product and they're trying to like constantly change you, it's not going to work. It's like being in a romantic relationship with someone always trying to change you, right? So that's really, I would say that in my first situation, that was the case. I felt that person did believe in me and who I was, and to the best of that person's ability. I thought that they did what they could. Certain people have limitations, whether it's, their own confidence or whatever, that hold them back from reaching higher levels. And that goes for singers and managers. But it just became obvious at some point that person didn't have the connections at a higher level or the confidence to be able to deal with some of those people. And then the second one, I think I don't think they ever got me. It was a constant battle of, well, why don't you try this and why don't you try that? And it was just not the right repertoire. It was always, this person was always sending me on auditions for the wrong thing. And I, it was really pretty terrible at times. And it wasn't, they were a kind person. It wasn't anything like that. I think they just really didn't get it. And so, at some point that, became very obvious. And it was actually pretty obvious to that person as well, that it was just not working.
Mm-hmm. Could you make the analog here of the phenomenon of when you're applying to conservatory or music school? Of course, everyone wants to shoot for, I want to go to Juilliard, I want to go to Indiana. So I want to be represented by IMG, I want to be represented by CAMI. The analog of finding the right voice teacher for you, which could be at, I'll never forget the first time somebody told me where Renee Fleming did her undergrad. It was like, who knows where? And I'm sure many people on this call can cite that for me in a second. But the idea of finding that right individual team member for you, irrespective of cachet necessarily.
I mean, you know, it's so important, just like it is with a voice teacher. And I understand, you know, there is a balance. Certainly, if you can find somebody that you feel like really believes in you and is really the right person for you, and they happen to be at Opus 3 or whatever, then that's great. Good for you. But in my opinion, the chances of that happening right out of the, you know, out of the gate are pretty small. I don't think there's anything wrong with making mistakes too. I mean, you know, you should always trust people around you. There should always be somebody, you know, a group of people that you can trust for advice, you know, vocal advice, career advice. I have looked to other managers. Actually, it's funny that Justin says that. I've always maintained relationships with, you know, a lot of different managers, both just friendly and also professionally. And have gone to them at different times and said, hey, you know, I'm looking for somebody new. Who do you think might be a good fit, you know? And that was always a really great introduction too. You know, I've had people look out for me when I was sort of on the out of one and like I'm looking for another one, and you know, just because they knew me and you know, maybe couldn't commit to me for whatever reason at that time, but you know, it's really important to just trust yourself and trust those around you. I should have listened to more people with the second one because I was advised by a couple of people, but I was nervous about being on my own. And I probably shouldn't have been because of where I was. I had just gotten my first Met contract. So I shouldn't have been nervous about it. I should have just like been okay with it for a year. But, you know,
well, let's pick up that thread that you just mentioned, which is the transitional thread. And I know a lot of people, Crystal just brought it up again, but several people beforehand asked, when you want to switch management, what's a way to do it amicably? How do you look around while do you do it when you're still under contract with a manager, or do you make yourself a free agent and all of that? So Blythe, let's start with you, and then Justin, I'd love to hear it from your perspective on transitional singers. Yeah, so Blythe, go for it.
Yeah, you know, it's really tough. It's like switching voice teachers, you know. You know, you have this relationship with this person. They're, you know, in my case, you know, my first manager also managed my husband's ensemble at the time. So it was really awkward. It's just really hard. You know, in both cases, I started looking before I left. I just started poking around at first. I started talking to people and, you know, I always asked for discretion. But, you know, I don't know if that was the right thing to do. But then when it came time, you know, for me to sort of move on, the first time I think I sent an email, but I sent an email saying I wanted to talk with the person, and I talked with them on the phone. And it was very difficult. They were very upset, and it was really awkward. But ultimately, we ended up being friendly, and I have sent that person other people that were very early on in their career. And the same with the second person. When I approached them and said, you know, this is just really not working, they said, I agree. I really haven't done much for you. I totally understand. And I was in the middle of a negotiation on another contract at the Met. And they even said, if you have somebody else that you're talking with, I'm happy to let them have that if you want. I mean, it was very amicable. But I've heard horror stories from other people too about all kinds of stuff happening, blackballing and people talking, you know what.
And have there been, out of those horror stories, have there been any consistent missteps or consistent actions that were taken by either singer or agent? I mean, blackballing is of course a terrible thing, but has there been one thing you could identify, if I had just hadn't done that, if I hadn't called that other person that time, you know, anything like that comes to mind?
It's really hard to tell because, you know, you only have like those person's words. So I
Right.
wasn't in their shoes. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like, I can only speak for myself, and I always tried to be as honest as I could be, as polite as I could be. Um, you know, when asking for discretion, I knew full well that there was a chance that, you know, it could get back to whoever I was with at the time. And you just have to sort of be okay with that and be prepared for that. You know, I think if it just depends on what your relationship is with your current management. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if
Sure.
it's a situation where you feel comfortable talking to them and just say, hey, whatever. But I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say that they didn't start looking before they left.
Okay, great. Justin, from the other side.
Please.
To go back to the first point, go to a boutique, guys. I mean, big management is its own thing. But and that's from someone who runs a boutique. So there you go. Take that with a grain of salt. I've been really lucky in my career so far where I've not had a lot of people leave, which I'm sure they will at some point. But I have had a lot of singers jump ship to us from other managers, and it's always really weird. I mean, we all know each other. All the managers talk. We have a coalition going on right now to try to fix some force majeure things. And you know, there's 40 of us on the call, and we represent probably 95% of the singers in America. Like, it's not. If you start looking, we will know. We all talk, and you know, even when I consider a singer for the roster, like, I vet them really heavily. I ask artistic administrators, directors, conductors, singers who they've worked with, like, would you want this person in the room? Do you want them to be at the party? And if the answer is no from anyone, I don't consider them anymore. So I think just being as transparent as possible. You know, I had a situation at the very beginning of my company where two singers actually left me on the same day. One of them, we had an in-person meeting. He wanted a manager with more European pull. And, you know, he was like, these are the commissions I owe you. Good luck. And I was like, cool. Like, I understand. And I see him in the hallway. It's super friendly. You know, he's someone I actually went to college with. So I expected it to be sort of collegial. But I understood because Stratagem's not concentrating on you. The other person, I heard secondhand that this person wanted to leave through a young artist administrator, and then, like, she sort of asked me to break up, but not really, and then asked to, like, stay on the rock. It was just a really sort of wishy-washy, bad situation. And now when I see that person, it's just really weird, and they run away from me, and it's not collegial, and, you know, I'm going to see these people in no love forever. So I think, again, it's going back to how you want to be treated. It's going back to, I hope for my singers that they all feel comfortable enough that before they want to leave the roster, they have a conversation where, like, I don't feel like I'm being featured. I don't feel like I'm singing the right repertoire. I don't feel like this or that. And that is what I'm striving for with every client. I know every manager is not like that. And I know there are certain managers who are scary to their singers. And singers feel like disposable objects. And, you know, if I say something, they'll cut me, or, you know, it's rough out there. But I really hope that the industry starts to get kinder and the industry starts to be more understanding. And I don't think I've ever had a singer leave me with a good reason that I've been upset. You know, I get it. And you know, no manager is ever going to make a singer's career. You guys are your own entities. Like, if you don't feel like your manager servicing you, like Blythe said, like, we work for you. So, you know, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit.
Do you think that to Blythe's point about singers looking to transition when they're still with their current representation, I hear what you're saying about transparency. How transparent and how early would you appreciate it if I am thinking, well, you're not really connecting me with the places that I want to be auditioning for? Do I bring that to your attention, give you a season to help make that happen, and then sort of like in a more like an employee review process, or do you think singers are too? Because I hear what both of you are saying, that managers work for singers, but I think if you ask any singer, gun to their head on the street, they wouldn't say that. There's a lot of fear of, well, my manager's going to be mad at me, just like my voice teacher's going to be mad at me.
It's so frustrating. And, you know, I have an example. There is a singer who came to us from Major Learners Program, I will not name which one, who after 6 months complained about us on Facebook and didn't come to me and was like, well, this company, you know, I signed with this management firm and they've only gotten me X amount of auditions in this 6 months, which it wasn't peak audition season. That's just weird. But I found out through a friend emailing me the Facebook post. Like, that's just, you know, when other managers ask me, should I take this person? I say, no. Like, you just, there is this web of, and no one's like nefarious and trying to ruin anyone's career, but like, I can't put my name behind someone who would do that. I think it's really shitty. Every singer, when they leave a manager, is looking before they leave. I mean, it's a really hard situation for singers to be in. Like, you can't leave your manager in a lot of cases until you have something else. And I've been on both sides of that. You know, there are singers who I've known that are leaving where I say, we'll leave you on the website, look for someone else. If they come to me, like, I'm happy to give you a recommendation, but that's not always how it happens. You know, I think from my perspective, whenever I take someone from another roster, I reach out to that manager and I'm like, you know, this person reached out to me. They're interested in joining us. What do you think about them? You know, would you recommend them? Are there any issues that you've experienced? And I feel really comfortable with about 90% of my colleagues where I can have that conversation. There are 10% where I absolutely would not. And honestly, like, I probably wouldn't touch any singers from that roster just because I don't feel like I have a collegial relationship or that signing that singer would be a cost-effective move in terms of my place in the industry. And I will say that those companies are fellow boutiques, not the big corporate firms, because I think the big corporate firms understand that if a singer is near the bottom of the roster, like, they're going to look for someone who's going to feature them a little bit more in most cases. So I think it's harder for the singers than it is for us. For managers, I think there's always going to be enough singers. I mean, just being honest.
Sure. Sure.
You know, Stratagem has had over 250 people reach out to us in the last calendar year, and about half of them are already managed. And we've taken 6. And that's the numbers for most of our colleagues. No one is expecting to, like, I'm going to triple my roster size in a year. Like, there's no manager that I know that's like, I got to load up those blonchins, you know? Right. So,
sure.
I think, just being a human. Just be a human. That's the answer.
Blythe, so Justin's talked a lot about sort of his side of the industry and getting the word on certain singers about whether or not to take them into the roster. Who should singers talk to vet potential managers?
I mean, other managers are really good. I think you got to talk to people who are not only on their roster, but maybe have been on a roster and then left to find out why they left. You know, I speak as a person who was on a roster that I thought I would never be on, that I sort of swore to myself I wouldn't be on because I thought it was too big and I would get lost and that it wasn't going to work and whatever. You know, it's so never say never. But, you know, it all sort of goes back to like what works for you as a person, and you know, what might be working for you right now may not work for you in another year or two, or maybe you shift Fox, or maybe you have 2 children like I did, you know, and all of a sudden your needs are a little bit different, and maybe you need a little different understanding. You know, having a lot to do with the contemporary music scene, it is, you know, I was with someone before who literally knew nothing about it and wasn't interested in learning anything about it. So that wasn't going to help me. So, I think you really have to be confident in who you are, and you have to be not only because of how it affects you being able to sell yourself and for them to be able to know who you are to sell you, but also because you have to be able to advocate for yourself. And to be a good human, I think you sort of need to know yourself too.
Mhm.
You can't go into jobs and have a chip on your shoulder, because everyone will
Right.
hear about it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we all have our days and make our mistakes, but
Sure.
if you are relatively secure in yourself, you can accept that and
Mhm.
own it.
Right. Excellent. Thank
Can
you.
I just jump in with one more thing?
Yeah.
I think just giving any manager that you choose to sign with like at least 2 seasons, I think is a logical thing to do. People start to notice when people jump rosters every year. I mean, you just gather a reputation as a singer in a way. And I think too, to properly market a singer, to get them, I mean, especially as houses are only coming to New York at once every year or 2 years or never, it's just really difficult to get a singer exposed to a large amount of houses without extensive international and national travel. So just there are plenty of people who I've signed who I get them a gig that week, and there are plenty who it takes a year, 2 years to like really get the momentum going. And I know singers who, they're 35 and they've had 7 managers, that just like you start to get that like something's wrong with some, and honestly, like unfortunately, it always gets blamed on the singer.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, and also like just to what Justin just said, like 6 months is not enough time to figure out if somebody is it's the right fit for you or not. I mean, not really. I mean, assuming that you went into it with this feels like it's the right situation and not with a lot of doubts. We've certainly made mistakes and then like gone, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that. But I mean, you have to give it some time, and if you're not happy with the way things are, you have to be confident enough to speak up. You have to say, hey, I heard so-and-so's in town. Is there a reason I'm not singing for them? And like Justin and I were talking about this, like if you're a person that needs a lot of communication and that person doesn't want to communicate a lot, then that's going to be a problem, and it's something that you can work out, certainly, but it's something that has to be addressed. How much information do you need? That should be something that should be discussed before you ever agree to work with that person. And also, as far as like we were talking about a lot of things with auditions and things like that, with so few companies coming to New York City and people having less money, therefore less time to hear people, you just don't know why, unless you can have a good rapport with your manager and be able to ask them. Like Justin was saying that, if he feels like it's necessary, he'll, offer that information to people, or certainly if they ask, but I was in a situation at one point where I never heard shit. And it was really annoying, I couldn't hear, and I'm like, but I need to know, because I need to know, like, is this something where, it's me and I need to work on something, or is it because, they're just not hearing people? It's a, 2-sentence email. So.
Right.
and sometimes companies just don't tell us, honestly. Like, I mean,
Sure.
I'd say at least more than half don't give managers feedback because they say they don't have time, which I understand. They have a lot to do. But I would say most of the time when singers aren't granted an audition, it's not because they're bad singers. It's because they heard you at a young artist program a year ago. They heard you at a show a year ago. And, there are so many administrators that you wouldn't recognize that I think it's just, I mean, that's going back to being a human. Like, I mean, we just signed my undergrad voice teacher to our roster, which is so funny. But he was like, I never would have expected, you to be a manager. And there were people who were really shitty to me at BU who I will never sign with a 10-foot pole. And there are people who are really nice who I represent now. Like, it's, you never know when that's going to look around.
Yeah. So I want to go backwards in the process. And you're coming out of a young artist program. And what would you advise emerging artists, unrepresented artists, to do? This is a multi-part question. is it better to be to reach out to an agent to make that initial contact, or wait for an audition, or to have been heard in a sort of young artist showcase thing? And a second part of that, Wes brings up a really good question. Those young artists who are then put in potentially toxic managerial positions, what tools do we give them to recognize those potentially abusive situations beforehand, and how to cope with them? So, Justin, go for it.
I think just know that people who can hire you in the future, whether it's managers, artistic administrators, conductors, directors, anybody, we're around. We all talk to each other. We all show up to engagements. You know, I mean, Blythe's manager is literally everywhere. Like, I mean, it's incredibly impressive.
It's
yeah. And, you know, I've talked to Blythe's manager about the singers he knows, and his Rolodex is incredible because he's at every young artist program. He's at all these performances. So like, we have, I would say all the managers that I know have extensive databases about who we've heard where, what they're singing, you know, and, you know, how they're progressing. And also I have a column that's, how was our interaction? Was it pleasant? Like, did they shake my hand? Did they run away? Like, I mean, it's sort of as simple as that sometimes. You know, I hope that singers, I know there's this young artist group on Facebook, which of course I'm not privy to, but a few singers have told me about it, where managers are being discussed, which I think is a really great thing. I think the information's out there. You know, if a manager is charging a retainer, if a manager doesn't communicate, if a manager, you know, all the negative stuff, like ask a singer on their roster who's been on it, and they'll tell you. Again, like, it's the transparency that I've seen the last couple of years in opera is really important. I think reaching out to managers is smart if you have a hook. So Ken Benson's one of my idols / mentors, and he wrote in an Opera News article years ago that you have to be tastefully shameless of the singer to reach out to people. And I think that's true. Like, if you make that connection of, oh, I worked with a conductor or director on your roster. Oh, I met you at this event. Oh, I dated your wife. I don't know, something. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Like, that's more likely to elicit a lengthier response from me than I am soprano X, here's a recording. Like, it just, and I will say I respond to every inquiry that comes in, evenly to whom it may concern, but they get a much shorter response and they have no chance of even being heard. So I think just staying in contact with people as a friend, I think is really important. If it ever starts to swing towards, oh, I'm like plotting to be on their roster in a few years, like that it's weird. It's icky. So I do think too that it's a responsibility of the young artist administrators to talk to their young artists about who they recommend. For example, we have almost an entire year of Pittsburgh young artists. It's one of the programs in this country I trust above all others, Utah being another. And I know Christopher Macbeth and Bill Powers talk to their singers when they graduate and say, these are the managers that we like and these are the ones that we don't. And, you know, I think as much as the peer sharing is incredibly important, like, people in administrative power also need to do that research and need to deliver that information to the singers.
Mm-hmm. Blythe, could you field Wes's question about potentially toxic singer-agent relationships and ways that young singers can potentially identify, aside from assuming they do due diligence and none of those red flags are raised? What are those things that maybe you should look for in those first 6 months to 12 months of work together?
You know, when I was first starting, I remember that there was this little short list of like the managers where they were just like creepy or controlling or whatever. And I'd like to think, I haven't heard much about those people in the last couple of years. And I think they might have sort of like fallen off. I don't know. And I was always surprised that like, unfortunately, a lot of women were preyed upon. And I never understood with all of the word that was out there. Granted, this was not, you know, social media wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. But I was always shocked at like how many people still went with those managers. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I feel like this does sort of go back to my original point of like, you really have to know yourself, and you really have to be able to like stand up for yourself, because in all aspects of this business, you know, it's very easy to feel like you are, I don't know how to say it other than like less than, you know, that you're not as, you know, that's why I think a lot of singers feel like they work for their manager. It's like, you know, everybody else is so, why we do work for no money, you know. You know, there is certainly a time and a place where you do, you know, you figure out what your requirements are for something and what you're getting out of it, and maybe you do something for nothing because of some other reason. But that's not really for nothing. I think that having these networks, these safe networks of information are helpful. Something I certainly didn't have when I was very first starting out. And you know, it's helpful. I do think that there are people like Justin was saying, who just are not going to be happy with anybody, and so they're just going to keep flopping around and swapping managers because they don't know what they want. You know, it's really I think when you're first starting out, making sure that you know who you are and know how to communicate effectively with someone is a really important skill. And if you're a very shy person, or depending on what your situation is, you know, I think using people around you for advice to help you get that going, it's a support.
Great. Another question for you, Blythe. Given the variety of work that you've done over your career, in new works and standard rep, was that intentional, or was it sort of just the way your career took you? Did you go seeking these things? And if it was intentional, was that important for you to communicate when finding representation?
Both. It was both unintentional and intentional. It sort of just happened that I was good at it, and was given some opportunities early on. I think my first like really hardcore contemporary piece was in Aspen, actually, when I was a student. And I just really liked doing it. And so I sought out more of it. You know, I thought originally when I was first out of school and first moved to New York that I wanted to have, you know, Susan Graham's career or whatever. You know, I wanted to have, you know, the mostly big standard rep career, and then, you know, maybe a smattering of these around, you know, because I like doing them, because I never thought that I'd be able to make a living doing them. You know, it was always sort of, oh, well, contemporary music is something you do if you can, and you can't do the other stuff. And there was this kind of a stigma about it for a long time, which has changed. So that change has certainly helped. And as that shift started to happen, I was also, you know, my life was changing. I was, you know, married for a while, thinking about kids, et cetera, et cetera. And the Center for New Music really is here in New York. So it made it easier for me to work closer to home. And then, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, I think with my second manager, I was toying with the idea of concentrating more on contemporary music. And since that wasn't working out with that person, I did have to find someone who was connected to it enough and passionate enough about it and the spread of it, you know, internationally, that that they would work with me on it, and was interested in making the connections with the people that maybe they weren't as familiar with, that I knew and was able to bring to the table.
Justin, now that we are, of course, in the midst of grappling with what our industry is going to look like post coronavirus, what do you feel like is going to change among the agent singer relationship? What's changing right now, and what do you see coming down the pike?
I've gotten a chance to connect with my clients as humans more, which I think is a great thing. I've gotten to know their hobbies and other non-operatic things. I know that also internally we've been calling it the pity party clock. A lot of my singers want to get back to work right away. A lot of my singers are still mourning lost work. Either way's fine. You know, I'm not going to give someone homework until they're ready for homework. But I know, you know, this week I've had probably 10 rep discussions with people because they're bored. You know, there's only so much Netflix you can watch. So I hope it strengthens it. I really do. I hope that some of the companies, like Blythe said, that have been like hanging around, charging retainers, being creepy, not representing their singers in the correct way, I hope they close. I really do. Like, there are just singers out there who are paying hundreds of dollars a month to be managed when they do not need to be managed. And it's only hurting their careers. You know, I hope that a lot of my colleagues who I think are doing a great job don't close. And there have been concerns of that, which is really unfortunate. But I do, like, I think when Blythe was talking about her managerial journey, like, there are just so many choices now. There are so many firms that are opening up. There are so many, and I think artist management in opera is slowly catching up to what you can and cannot do to singers. I hope, like, you know, a minimum size of gig you can commission, not charging a retainer, not commissioning per diem. Like, I just, to be a little bit more artist friendly, I think is really important. So I hope that this continues the conversation between, you know, in a big way, the Agma Solos Coalition and the managers, and in a small way with each individual singer and their manager.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I'm just going back through some questions. I'm going to throw some at you really fast so we can get through as many as possible. Justin, how often do your singers get in touch with you on a, is it a reach out to you once a week just to sort of check in? Is it an as needed? What do you prefer?
It's as needed. If I don't hear from a singer for a week and a half, 2 weeks, it's weird. If only, like, how you doing? When singers are on gigs that are really intense, I'll hear from them less, unless there's a problem. If the singer is sitting at home between gigs, I'll probably hear from them more. It also, when we have new singers where we're building their website page on our website, where they're building their press kit, like, we're just going to be in contact a little bit more. But I try to do a major rep discussion every 6 months, just to check in, have an hour and a half, 2 hour discussion. What are you singing? What does the RE package look like? What level of company are you most interested in? But in between those, I mean, obviously I don't talk to my singers twice a year. You know, I think just having human conversations with them is interesting too. But, you know, I try to keep business correspondence via email. I just lose track of it via Facebook or text. But often, if it's like a quick question, it'll be over text.
And to the point of rep conversations, do you think it's important that your singers specialize in something?
If they'd like to. I think everyone in young artist programs and universities in this country are taught to be this weird Swiss Army knife that does everything okay, but nothing great. And there are singers who sing lots of things really well, like Blythe talked about, the line between musical theater and new music and opera sort of blurring, which I think is really cool. You know, for me, with roster need, like, there are certain Fox that I look for at certain times. Like, we have a baritone switching to tenor, so I had an opening for lyric baritone, and I was looking for, like, you know, a Barber, Figaro sort of baritone. But, you know, I tell singers all the time, when you're out of young artist programs, like, if you don't have a German already, that's okay. Like, we can find something else for you. So specializing in that way, I think is important. But I think too, there aren't a lot of singers in today's industry making their money on 3 roles. Like, I think there has to be some sort of versatility there. That's important.
That's really interesting that you say that, because fun story that some of you will identify with. Okay, so the last time around when I was looking for a new manager this last go round, I sang for a lot of people. And Many of them were really great and really candid and said, look, you know, I like X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure about this, you know, or I just don't need anybody else of your type, blah, blah, blah. And I felt like they were being straight shooters. It was cool. It was totally fine. But I did have more than one person basically tell me that it's really great that you have all this contemporary stuff, but if you don't have 3 roles that are, you know, mainstream, like Carmen, da da da, that I can sell you as, then I can't work with you. And these are people that are well known, you know, not big box, but like also not, you know, tiny little specialized boutique either. And I was shocked because I felt like here I was like relatively established. I've been doing this for a long time and had a lot of stuff, you know, going for me, including work coming up. And to hear that was like kind of shocking to me. And I was concerned actually that that was the way that things were going to be going. But I think that those people were wrong.
I mean, I hope not. I hope that's not how the industry goes, honestly, because I think then we lose a lot of great art being produced. I mean,
Right.
you know, for all of the cool concepts we can do for Elixir, it's still Elixir. Like, I mean, there's just, you know, a certain cap on how many diners and you know, 1920s farms we can set Elixir on. And, you know, for me, new music means great musicianship. It means connection to text. It means musicality. It does not mean busted voice. And I know many managers who hear new music and they're like, oh, the voice must not be bel canto enough or Italian enough. And that, to me, just bothers me.
Justin, as a final question, in going back to the post-COVID landscape and in all the discussions you've been having in the managers forum that's been put together, how receptive are managers going to be to being approached by unmanaged singers, and are rosters contracting or are they freezing right now? What's the current state of things?
I don't think it's changed anything really. I mean, we're moving forward with our director's wing. We're moving forward with, you know, I signed a soprano this week. I just got her contract as we've been on this call. So, you know, it's not that anything's locking up. I do think ask the singers on those rosters, like, do you think your manager is looking for X, Y, Z, or even to expand at all? But I always say, you know, as much as I don't have any glaring needs on my roster right now, like I'm never arrogant enough to turn away talent. And if someone's to come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, you know, I'm doing covers at the Met or I'm at an A-house level, like, you know, we make room per se if it's a good fit. So, you know, for me, I always tell unmanaged singers or even singers who are managed, what's the worst we can do? Say no or not respond. Like, it's not that bad. So I would implore people to email. I think it gives me something to listen to. And, you know, I think managers too, like we're all sitting at home like, waiting for the phone to ring and having these companies like slowly cancel our lives. Like we have time now. So I think if someone was to reach out to me, this would be a really good time.
Yeah. I was going to say this. I mean, you have to think of you're a business, you know, and you have to schedule hours for your business. And if one of those things is going and working on, I mean, this is a great time to update your website, make some new recordings, you know, you can do all of those things now and reach out to those agents and say, hey, you know, especially if you have some sort of a personal connection, I think that always helps. If they have someone on their roster that you know that they can go to and say, hey, is this person a nutbag or what? It will just help move you forward in the line. You know, if you don't have any personal connection to them at all, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but like, it just makes it a little bit, it's like, okay, you know, you want to grease the wheel a little.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're all human. I like being told stratagem's cool. I mean, and I think that, you know, the social network trope, like, you know, it's cool. Like, I mean, people love being on the roster and I'm really proud of that. And I think that lack of desperation per se makes us really attractive. And, you know, that's why people are reaching out to us. And, you know, it's a product. It's all a product. Yeah. We're all businesses.
Absolutely. Well, I have no doubt we could go on in this conversation through the end of social distancing. However, I want to thank you both for incredible conversation, for your honesty, for your humor. This has been really wonderful and eye-opening, and thank you all for joining us, for your great questions. Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Reach out if you have any other questions.
Yes, please.
Yeah.